standalone, then this is the last and only choice I need to make. I leave everything else empty, and I simply say create the setup files. Standalone means you're not updating your player over the network. You'll only update your player by bringing new memory cards to it. So with this configuration ready to go, I choose Create Setup Files. I perhaps make a folder on my desk where these files will go. Or I could simply choose to browse directly on my machine to the drive that is my SD card. I don't have an SD card on my machine, but if I did, it would show here. I could simply select that SD card and publish directly to the card. In my case, I'm going to publish to a folder on my disk, on my hard disk, on my desktop. I'm going to say OK, and the configuration files are written off to that folder. When I've got everything set here and I'm ready to publish, I simply say Create Setup Files. I choose the location where I want to publish these. In this case, I'm publishing to a folder on my hard disk. I could have chosen to go to the SD card directly if I had one inserted in my machine, which I don't. But I'm going to choose a folder here on my disk, in my desktop actually, called Setup. I'm going to write the setup files to that location. Once that's done, I say OK, and I'm all set. Those setup files have been written to a folder on my hard disk. They can be copied to an SD card and put to the player, and the player configuration will proceed. I put the card in the player, turn the player on, and I'll soon get a message that says, setup is complete. You may now remove the card. However, if I'm configuring my player for publishing method over the network, then I need to make some different choices. Remember, I enabled all 4 network publishing methods on my copy of BrightAuthor, so all 4 network publishing methods appear here. Now, we could spend a lot of time on details about these. That's an advanced topic. I'm not going to go into tremendous detail on these publishing methods. Simply at this point, we're going to choose and see how they appear if I choose one. Let's fix everything else here. Raise player, raise player. Everything else is how I want it to be. So local file networking is the method that publishes over my local area network. And when I choose local file networking, it forces me to enable the player's own local web server and forces me to assign a username and password. Now, I can type anything in here I wish, username and password are at my discretion, but I have to do it. And that's what allows me to retain control of my player. Imagine that I've got players on my local area network, but so do you. And the two of us are working together, but I've got responsibility for one set of players, and you have responsibility for a different set of players. You don't want me accidentally changing your players, and I certainly don't want you accidentally changing mine. So this username and password is what assures that my copy of BrightAuthor can only talk to my players. And your copy of BrightAuthor will only talk to yours because you will have certainly created a different username and password for your players. Now, when I go to find my players on my local area network, I'll only find those that match the username and password that I've created here, and therefore I will only be able to publish to my players. If, on the other hand, I choose to publish via the BrightSign network, remember I'm already signed in. I signed in earlier, and so BrightAuthor knows the BrightSign network account that I belong to, and therefore knows already the BrightSign network account that this player should be assigned to. So when I choose to publish via the BrightSign network, I get some choices here, as, for example, how often the BrightSign player should communicate with the servers, and which group of players this player should, by default, drop into. I've named my group the default group, And so simply by choosing this and a group of players, I'm done. I don't need to say anything more. I don't need to remember my account name, username, or password for the BrightSign network because BrightAuthor already knows it, and BrightAuthor is ready to put that into the players as it goes. Now, the last method here for publishing is called simple file networking. Simple file networking it represents the case where I'm publishing my presentation to a server someplace, but it's my own server. It's my own storage that my own players can see. And so I'm going to write my presentations there, and I need to tell the player where there is. I need to give the player the URL that will take the player to that server and into the right folder where the player will be able to find the presentation that I want it to find. That's what we refer to when we mean simple file networking. It means you have a server someplace with a URL that you can publish to, and it's going to be http:// www, or an IP address and a folder name or something like that where your server folder can be found. Now, I can't tell you in advance what this is going to be because everybody who uses this method has something different. But you work together with your local IT folks to create a location on your network that can be found via an HTTP URL. That's the key. It's not a simple network share. It's what we call a web share. So once you've got that information from your IT folks, you can publish to it. It's at this point in setting up our player that we're telling the player that this is where it should go to look, and here's how frequently it should check to see if something is there new for it. So very simply, local file networking, BrightSign network, or simple file networking are your network methods, or you can publish standalone. We're going to go BrightSign network in my case because that's what I'm using, and everything else can be left alone. Defaults on rate limiting. This is an advanced subject, so for now we'll just simply take the defaults, and in a future webinar we'll talk in detail about what's happening here. But go with the defaults and say create your setup files. I'm going to put them in the same setup folder I did before, and that is ready to go to my BrightSign player. My player will then boot, connect to my BrightSign network account, and wait for me to publish a presentation. So now let's talk about building our first presentation and publishing that presentation. This won't take long. This is actually a very straightforward topic. We choose to build a new presentation, give the presentation a name, and choose where you're going to store it. I store all my presentations in a folder here I call BrightAuthor Projects. And BrightAuthor Projects, I choose the player that I'm working with. I choose the video output that I'm going with, whether it's VGA or HDMI. Notice that when I choose VGA, for example, my palette of available screen resolutions is different than when I choose HDMI. If I choose HDMI, I have a much deeper set of choices. All the broadcast choices are available to me. The most traditional is 1080i, which is right here, 1920 by 1080 by 5994i, or in Europe it would be 60i. I should say in former PAL countries it would be 60i. In former NTSC countries it's probably 5994i. But either way, these two represent what we often refer to as 1080i. Or here's 720p, same situation. The NTSC countries would use 1280 by 720 by 5994p. P stands for progressive, I stands for interlace. Or 1280 by 720 by 60p. These would be the so-called 720p or so-called 1080i. I'm going to choose 1080i and hit create. We give you some choices of layouts, multi-zone layouts, or others are ready to go. I'm simply going to choose full screen. And now with my full screen presentation here ready to build, I'm ready to put items on the timeline. Now, an advanced topic would be working with this layout and creating different zones and laying out different zones for different uses. We'll cover a lot of that in a future webinar, but it's sufficient at this point to say that I can build any zone on the screen anywhere I want, and I can add zones for images or for other uses, put those on the screen anywhere I need them to be, and build out a multi-zone presentation. Today's presentation, though, is simply going to be a single full-screen presentation. I'm going to go to playlist editing mode, and I simply put my items on the screen that I want to display. And notice I'm putting a mix of still images and video files on this playlist, and I'm arranging them in any order I wish. I can move these around. I can delete them by hitting the delete key. I can put these in any order I want them to run. Here I've got a movie trailer from the old Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows movie, a picture I took of a lighthouse in Santa Cruz, California, some water at Monterey Beach. Here's a movie trailer. Bring this movie up here. Let me get one more movie on the timeline. Here's a movie trailer from Secretariat, the movie that ran in the theaters not long ago. Okay, so here I've got, looks like 8 items on my timeline. This timeline will simply play in order forever. The still images, when I look at them, I can right-click and choose Edit, and I see how long that still image will be on the screen. I can do, by holding down my Control key, I can select multiple images, and I can simultaneously edit all of their properties. So now when I get to this slide in, I want to fade from black, right, fade from background colors, black by default, so we'll go that way. All right, now I get a video image. This video file will fade to black, and then this graphic will fade up from black. It'll stay on the screen for 10 seconds, then it'll fade to black, and my new video file will begin, and so forth. So I get a nice, pleasant set of transitions going on here, and it's ready to publish. Let's save it. So now it's saved. Saving a presentation locally, remember I'm going to publish via the BrightSign network. Saving a presentation locally does not make it available up on the network to be published out to a player. I need to take one more step, and that's what this button here is all about, upload to the network. Okay, ready to go. So now we move to the Publish tab. And here are my publishing methods: publishing to local storage, publish via the BrightSign network, publish via the local network, publish via Simple File Network. I'm going to choose to publish in this case using the BrightSign network. And when I select the BrightSign network, I see the current schedule, which I can delete by simply hitting the delete key. And now I've got a clear calendar. Here's the presentation I just built, Ray's Bogus Presentation. If I had not uploaded it to the BrightSign network, it would not be available to me here on this list to publish. And notice here I'm also choosing my player groups. I could have more than one group of players. I've only got 2 groups right now, and I'm going to use this default presentation group to publish Ray's Bogus Presentation. When I drop something on the timeline or in the calendar, it will run at that time and date. So Tuesday, July 3rd, well, that's already in the past, so that would be dumb. But let's move forward in time to the 10th of July. Nah, actually, let's go back to this week. Those of you who are watching this later will certainly understand that I recorded this on July 5th. So let's move this to today, and now it will run today at noon from 12 to 1. And I can adjust that to run it for any length, or I can simply double-click and I can manually type in the time I want it to run. And I can go right down to the minute. I can go, I want this to run from 12:01 p.m. until 2:13 p.m., and that's acceptable. It'll take that. I can say OK, and that will be the result, from 12:01 to 2:13. But also it might be that I simply, deleting that, I'm going to bring it back on here from scratch, double-click. I can just say run all day, every day, and cheat. And that fills the entire schedule, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, out into infinity with this one presentation. And if I were now to publish this by hitting Publish, this presentation and its associated data will be sent out to all the players in this group. Yeah, it's been published. Let's go check the group. Again, I'm still using the BrightSign network. And one of the features of the BrightSign network is this ability